There's a rumor going around. If you like this video and subscribe, you will be offered a position in UA. Hi guys, this is the first part of What If Natsu Was the Son of Acnologia. I hope you enjoy. The sound of destruction always made him feel more alive. The smell of blood sent a pleasant shiver down his spine to the very tip of his tail. Until yesterday, the village underneath the great beast was full of life. Children laughing and playing, teenagers getting their first taste of love. The magnificent beast scoffed. He hated what the humans thought was true love. They knew nothing about it. They claimed multiple others as their true love before they settled into marriage. Humans would never know what true love is. Disgusting. A piercing cry broke the dragon from his thoughts. What's this? A child, still alive? Wondered the beast. The screech of the child wasn't the only thing that caught his attention. In a lazy fashion, the dragon turned around. What's one more kill? It wouldn't take him more than a second to blast the child into oblivion. His sharp, blue eyes locked onto the child, and the mighty dragon froze. There sat a child, no older than 3. His clothes were torn, and little cuts and bruises covered the body of the pink-haired boy. In every other situation, he would smash the thing quickly to cease the attack on his sensitive ears. It wasn't empathy that stopped the dragon. It was the immense magical power that radiated off the boy, the power that could rival any grown mage, and for some reason, it felt familiar. The dragon paused, a thought that would have Igneel laughing his ass off came to mind. Many dragons had taken disciples. Perhaps. Sighing, the dragon landed in front of the boy. The boy's big black eyes widened almost comically. He fell silent immediately. Your name? Growled the dragon, set to carry out his brilliant plan. The boy blinked, shocked at being addressed by the monstrosity before him. Stuttering with little fear, the boy muttered, "En Natsu." The child cocked his head in curiosity. Do you have a name, Mr. Dragon? The dragon raised a scaly eyebrow at the child, amused. Amusing little Gaki, aren't ya? I am the Black Dragon in the Book of Apocalypse, Chaos Dragon King, and King of all dragons, Acnologia. Confirming, no other soul was left alive in the vicinity, he continued, well, brat, is there anyone waiting for you? The black eyes blazed with tears. No, he sobbed. Acnologia smirked evilly, but the boy was too occupied with his crying to notice. Say, brat, would you like to learn Dragon Slayer magic? The boy's head snapped up, eyes locked on Acnologia. A few loose tears trickled down his dirty cheeks. You would take care of me. I suppose that's one way to saw. Acnologia's words stumbled to a halt. Natsu had leapt to his feet before the dragon could complete his sentence and latched onto one of his massive claws. Thank you. Acnologia sighed and took the boy in his paw, carefully gripping the child. Squishing the child would be of no use to him, nor would letting the brat fall. You will have to do absolutely everything I tell you if you wish to stay with me, said Acnologia as he spread his great, black wings. With a few strong sweeps, the dragon was in the air, soaring above the ruins. Yes, of course, you won't regret it, the boy exclaimed with a large, toothy grin. Yes, he'll be the perfect student. 2 years later Natsu was covered in cuts and bruises. His little body was hard at work, sucking in as much air as possible. His right hand was bent at an awkward angle that sent pain shooting up his arm at every little tremor. A large shadow flew overhead, landing behind the boy. The ground shook under the immense weight. That was disappointing. You needed 3 hours to defeat that demon, called out the smirking Acnologia. The dragon hated to admit it, but he was impressed. It was a magnificent accomplishment to take down a demon of such large proportions, especially at 5 years old. In fact, very few grown mages could boast about such a victory. Yeah, right, why you, overgrown lizard. Natsu scoffed as he panted, still fighting for air as he turned to face his mentor. Admit it, you're happy. It was true, Acnologia was very pleased with his disciple's leaps in power. Somewhere along the line, the two had developed an odd father-son relationship. Your job here is done. It is the time we head back to the cave. You are ready to learn the secret arts of dragon slaying. Standing unsteadily, Natsu walked towards the dragon. 5 years later, covered by the shadow of an ancient tree, Natsu curled further into his black jacket. A necklace with 18 oddly colored scales fell out from under the black, scaly scarf that was tightly wrapped around his neck as he shifted in his sleep. In the past 5 years, Natsu had grown immensely in strength, far exceeding Acnologia's expectations. The 18 dragons killed by the boy's own hands proved it. Due to his impressive feats, the Dragon Prince earned his place in the Palace of Dova, the floating island of the Dragon Council. A great honor. Never, in the history of mankind, had a human stepped foot on the sacred land. The council was made up of 20 kings and queens, all representing the clans of their element. Underneath them stood their princess and princesses. Each seat in Heaven Hall, a beautifully crafted stone chamber, was inherited throughout generations. The only exception was if a king or queen was successfully defeated through combat by a challenger. Stretching with a mighty yawn, the boy stumbled to his feet, wiping the dirt off his black pants. There was no use trying to force himself to sleep. The lethargic feeling in his bones washed away like a hurricane as his senses spread over the clearing. Acnologia was not scolding him for resting midday. "Father," he called. There was no response. Panic swelled in the young boy. Months ago, the Dragon King had informed his son that he would not be around for much longer. Acnologia explained that many dragons plan to seal themselves within the bodies of their dragon slayer to avoid the process of dragonification. An idiotic decision in the eyes of the power-hungry duo. Nevertheless, Acnologia was going to take advantage of the situation. It was time for Natsu to forge his own path. Again, Natsu hollered, "Where are you, you overgrown lizard?" The panic had managed to seep into his voice. Still no response. "Daad," he shouted. Tears lined his eyes, but the stubborn boy refused to cry. "I'm not ready yet, you can't leave me, damn it. You didn't tell me what to do. I don't know what to do." Natsu clenched his fist as he walked aimlessly through the woods. The anger was bubbling to the surface. "Acnologia, this isn't funny. Today was that fateful day. The day the dragons disappeared. July 7th x 777. Time skip asterisk. The Dragon Prince refused to rest. He had been walking for several days now. His eyes were red and dry from the lack of sleep. The forest was considerably less denser than the boy was used to, but he was desperate to get away from the cave he grew up in and find something, anything worthwhile to do until Acnologia could come back for him. The separation couldn't be very long, right? Natsu was so lost in his thought, he didn't even notice the old woman watching him down the dirt path. A brat, this far into the forest. Ryuzuka sighed. "Damn it, how far do I have to go to get rid of all the pests?" Focusing, she noticed something rather disturbing about the boy as he got closer. His eyes were empty, lifeless, hollow. Already regretting her decision, she hollered after the boy, "Hey, brat. What are you doing out here?" Natsu's head snapped up, spotting the pink-haired lady 50 feet to his right. How did he not notice her? Sleep-deprived and hungry, the grumpy Natsu rolled his eyes and crossed his arms over his chest. One of his sleeves was missing. "Why do you need to know, old hag?" A vein bulged on her forehead. "Who are you calling, old hag, you ungrateful brat?" The boy grumbled some not so savory words under his breath, glaring at the woman. "Where are your parents?" Ryuzuka asked, trying to ignore the desire to beat the boy with her broom. A trickle of sadness wandered into the soulless, black eyes before it was washed away disturbingly quick in Ryuzuka's opinion. "Left me," he whimpered in an uncharacteristic show of weakness. The wise woman was not all that surprised. It was a common occurrence around the world, unfortunately. Makarov is always happy with a new kid, she thought, and this brat could definitely use a friendly environment. "You're one annoying little gaki, you know that," she muttered, meeting the boy's eyes unwavering with determination. "Come with me, it's Natsu," informed the young boy as he eyed her with suspicion. "Why the heck should I let you tell me what to do?" he barked. "I know someone who might be able to help you," said Ryuzuka, her eyes narrowing. Natsu cocked his head, suspicion melting into curiosity. "Help me how? Depends on what you're looking for." Natsu sighed. "Fine, hag. Show me the way." Ryuzuka gave the Dragon Prince a dirty look before she turned around, muttering about how annoying and ignorant children are. The town of Magnolia was not far. In a beautiful town known as Magnolia was the loudest, most destructive but above all else the strongest guild in the whole Kingdom of Fury. The name of that guild was proudly written above the wooden orange gates of the building Ryuzuka and Natsu stood. "What the heck is this?" Natsu asked skeptically. Ryuzuka gave him a funny look. "You lived under a rock or something, brat. That's Fairy Tale Guild you stand in front of." Natsu shrugged. "Not under a rock, but I guess that's one way to say it." "Fairy Tale. That sounds like a pretty stupid name to me." Ryuzuka stared at the short boy before shaking her head. "And they called her weird. Without further delay, Perliuzica threw the doors open. The size of the entrance hall was impressive but not as much as the halls of the Dova Palace. The number of people beating each other up in the hall was another matter entirely. This some kind of fight club? I don't need a fight club, Natsu explained as he turned to Perliuzica, who ignored the boy as she yelled, catching the attention of many members. Where's Makarov? Perliuzica yelled. Over here, Perliuzica. So who's that? The small old man asked from his spot on the bar. Heck if I know, Perliuzica explained, found him wandering in the woodses. With that said, the healer turned around and quickly marched away. Don't bother me if you don't have to. There was a muttered, too many people around, before she was out of hearing range. The moment she was out of sight, the guild members turned their heads toward the dragon prince, who turned his head from the road toward them. So what is your name, my boy? Makarov asked the child in front of him, whose face went blank as he spoke. Natsu Souleater. Natsu Souleater. That's, an interesting name you got there. Makarov concluded with a small smile under his white mustache. My father gifted me with the name, Natsu explained, his eyes looking around the room. Father, what were you doing in the woods then? A member with a cigar in his mouth asked. Left. A young, blue-haired girl seemed shocked for some reason. Excuse me, who was your father? She asked quietly. A smirk cracked Natsu's face. My father is the king of all dragons. A chaos dragon of destruction, the Dragon King Acnologia. A dead silence, unusual for this place, filled the hall following his words. The short master palled at his words, his eyes widening. Some members seemed perfectly aware of who the boy was talking about, and they were terrified. Acnologia is still around. One member wondered quietly. Of course, he is. Why wouldn't he be? Natsu shot back as he glared at the member. The silence stretched again. The silence that was broken by a boyish voice full of disbelief. Yeah, right. Like some king of dragons would raise an asshole like you, shouted half-naked black-haired boy. Who are you calling an asshole, stripper? Natsu said. Wanna go against me, smartypants? I will warn you, the boy shouted back. Gray, be quiet, don't patronize him. I mean, if this kid was raised by Acnologia. Another member tried to silence the boy. So what, you think I care? He can't just waltz in here and think he's all high and mighty because his father is a so-called dragon. I bet it's just some weakling filling his head with nonsense. I can beat him without a problem. Gray turned toward Natsu and flinched back in shock at the death glare the boy was sending him. Before the boy's eye twitched and he ran at the ice mage with surprising speed, his fist cocked back, and before anyone could react it buried in Gray's stomach, sending the boy flying. Don't you dare insult father, Natsu said quietly, but they could hear him. His eyes locked on the Gray that lied on a table not too far from the pinkhead. A shiver went down the ice mage's spine at the cold glare the dragon prince sent his way. Gray, yelled scarlet-haired girl not even a year older than the mage Natsu just sent flying. The girl ran towards Natsu, and just when sword appeared in her hand, Makarov yelled, Urza. Stop. Why, master? He just punched Gray. Urza yelled angrily but stopped, her sword disappearing. And Gray started it, Makarov answered. And besides, he will become our member. Wait, say that again. Natsu blinked at the master, who chuckled. You are free to stay here if you would like. I recommend you to stay here, really. We are all family here, and if you don't have any, it is a reason more to stay. What if I don't want to join? And besides, I have to find father. Natsu explained. You will find him easier if you join. We have more sources, and I'm sure someone would mention seeing a giant black dragon to me. And you could take on missions in order to find out more, Makarov told him. Natsu thought about it. The old man had a point. After few more moments of thinking, he decided, okay, I'll join, but if I don't like it here I'll leave whenever I want. Then follow me, Makarov said with a smile. They went to bar and Makarov took out a stamp with fairy tale symbol on it. From the corner of his eye, he could see a redhead requip mage moving toward Gray, who was starting to get white-haired kids beside her and few more further back. Now that he looked more careful around, he could tell there were a lot more children than he originally thought. His eyes locked with a white-haired girl who was sitting at the bar a meter further from them. Her crystal blue eyes watching him curiously. His attention was brought back to the old master when the short man spoke, holding the stamp up. Where and what color? Makarov said. Right shoulder, blue outline, black on the inside, Natsu told him. Here you go, Makarov said as he stomped the stamp on Natsu's shoulder, Now you are officially a member of Fairy Tail. Few members cheered but some still seemed guarded. Not that Natsu cared much. With nothing better to do, the pink-haired boy sat at the bar next to the white-haired, black and purple-clad girl. A barmaid smiled at him as she handed him a glass of orange juice. Natsu thanked her quietly as he looked at the brightly colored liquid in his glass, unsure what to do with it considering he never saw it before, and while it smelled like orange it was far too bright. "You are pretty strong, aren't you?" White-haired girl spoke as she jumped from the bar on the chair next to him. "Yeses," Natsu replied, but didn't seem too interested in small talk. "My name's Mira Jane Strauss, but everyone here just calls me Mira," the teen beside him introduced herself. Natsu nodded in acknowledgement, not sure what else to say. Is she expecting me to say something? I've never really talked to people like this before. It shouldn't be that different than the conversation with dragons, right? Mira frowned but smiled after a second. Not a talkative type, huh? Your name is Natsu, right? Natsu nodded, still puzzled by the weird girl. You don't mind me calling you Natsu? Mira questioned again. No, Natsu replied as he looked at the girl curiously. Are you a wizard? He tried. Mira's smile widened. Yup. I'm a takeover mage. Are you a dragon slayer? Since your father was a dragon, I sort of assumed you would be a dragon slayer. Natsu looked at her somewhat surprised. How do you know about dragon slayers? Oh, the blue-haired girl you saw earlier is a dragon slayer as well. She joined barely 2 days ago. Natsu's eyes widened slightly. Was she a daughter of a queen or a king? Wendy, come over here. I want you two to meet. Mira said with a grin as the bluehead looked at them with huge brown eyes, her head turning from a girl that looked like a miniature version of Mira. The girl quickly walked to them and looked nervously at Natsu before looking back at Mira. Come on. Introduce yourself. Wendy looked somewhat horrified when Natsu turned his attention to her. The pink-haired dragon slayer was somewhat troubled by that. Is she that horrified of me? She is a dragon slayer. It's not like I'll kill a fellow kin. Wendy, on the other hand, was horrified for a completely different reason. What if I say something stupid? Why is Mira doing this? What should I say? Is he expecting me to say something? I remember Grandini talking about Acnologia. If he's his son, then I'm surely bothering him. Natsu opened his mouth to speak but closed them after a moment, confused by a situation he was unfamiliar with. My name is Wendy Marvell, she stammered quickly. Come on Wendy, no need to be shy, Mira said with a smile, the miniature version of her walking to them. Hey, my name's Lizana. Natsu stared at her for a moment before turning back to Wendy. Lizana looked at her own outstretched hand awkwardly before slowly retreating it. Let your name be carried far. The name is power, Natsu replied after a moment, deciding to give it a try. If the girl was raised by a dragon, then he could talk to her as such. She would understand him if no one else would. Wendy's eyes widened in surprise as she looked at Natsu in shock. He gave me a formal dragon greeting. Wendy quickly shook herself and replied accordingly, and your name further. The name is Respect. Natsu gave her a barely visible smile, ignoring the curious looks the two girls beside them sent their ways. The girl looked shyly at her feet. What is the name of your honorable parent? I was raised by Sky Dragon Grandini. I am a Sky Dragon Slayer, she answered. Sky Dragon, they're amazing trackers. It's hard to hide from them since they can feel the flow of the wind. He said with a thoughtful expression, a conversation with Sky Dragon King Himmel about similar topic coming to his mind. You know something about Sky Dragons? She asked hopefully, her eyes shining with happiness. Of course I do. You have to know what you hunt and who your kin is. Wendy paled, and as he saw that, he quickly added, I never encountered a Sky Dragon that goes by the name of your mother. She isn't of royal blood, is she? You killed a dragon? Asked the shocked member near him who heard him. His shout attracted the attention of few more members. Natsu rolled his eyes, so much about pleasant conversations. Natsu turned to the member and sighed before taking out his necklace with dragon scales attached to it. Several, yes, 18 to be precise. Wendy stared at Natsu in pure astonishment but not a small amount of fear. The boy before her was powerful. She knew that. The circle of Natsu's friends didn't grow after the first day. Mira and Wendy could be seen around him more often than not. Lizana was on friendly terms along with her brother Elfman, but that was pretty much it. Gray made a point in either avoiding him or annoying him, which didn't end well for him. Urza looked at him most of the times all high and mighty, demanding he should not be in this guild after attacking a fellow member over something as petty as a childish insult, which ended up in quite an argument between Mira and Urza. Soon after the initial shock of being around people without the orders to kill them worn off, Natsu made his way to the mission board, and with Wendy by his side and sometimes Mira, he went outside, coming back soon for another. The more time that passed, the less time he spent in guild hall, and he couldn't help but find it more relaxing. 6 years later, the spring breeze passed through the Magnolia Park, making the leaves rustle under the massive old oak tree where two friends sat talking to each other quietly. The grass blades softly moving around the two as the breeze passed over them again. "Are you sure you don't need my help?" a 16-year-old Natsu asked Mira. The black-clothed teen ran a hand through his short spiky hair as he glanced at the beauty beside him, dressed in Gothic-styled black sleeveless shirt and corset over it along with red leather pants. "Yes, I'm sure. I'm an S-class mage as well, you know. You should have more faith in me," Mira said with smirk. A sound of feet rustling moving towards them made them both look up just as Elfman spoke. "Mira, we need to go. The train leaves soon." The white-haired wizard glanced at Natsu, who looked at the Strauss brother with blank face, hiding his annoyance. "And you don't have to worry so much about them. I'm there to protect them. You'll be with your boyfriend when we come back," Lisanna teased with a smirk that grew as Mira's face went red. "He's not my boyfriend, Lisanna." Mira refused to look at Natsu, too embarrassed to say anything as she stood up and marched toward her siblings, brushing past them. The two looked after her, somewhat surprised by her quick departure, but quickly followed after her as the white-haired beauty yelled, "Get your ass moving, will ya?" They hurried after her, no one paying attention to the pink color that spread over Dragon Slayer's ears and cheeks. Natsu was coming to the guild after another successful job, Wendy happily skipping beside him, a white and blue cats with white wings flying above them. The mission was a spur-of-a-moment thing. He wasn't really planning on taking any until Mira came back, but he quickly realized that wasn't the best idea when boredom hit. When Natsu and Wendy opened the doors of the guild and instead of fights and celebrations found crying faces of members, it was an understatement to say they were surprised. Not that he showed anything else except raising an eyebrow. Wendy, Happy and Carla seemed a lot more concerned and didn't even try to hide it. What made him worried was when he spotted Mira bawling her eyes out along with Elfman. When he didn't saw Lisanna, he got an idea of what happened. Strauss siblings were on an S-class mission after all. He went to Mira. As he walked toward her, he heard several other members saying something about him. Something as, "Why is he here? He should go, nobody doesn't need him here now. He doesn't even care," or, "That emotionless freak should just go away." Natsu shoot them few glares and they shut up. Wendy, horrified and already crying, was walking behind him. When he came to Mira, he knelt beside her and hugged her strongly. She buried her head in his shoulder and cried. "What happened? Who made you cry?" he asked as he gently stroked her hair. Lisanna. She's dead," she said, sobbing. "Who killed her?" Natsu asked, trying to show compassion as much as possible, but to little avail. Years of learning how to hide one's emotions might not make you emotionless, but it definitely makes it harder to show them when you want to. Truth, as horrible as it was that the Dragon Prince cared more about Mira crying than Lisanna's death. "Don't care about the dead," Acnologia used to say, "care about the living that are worthy of it." She and Wendy were the only ones who haven't seen him as a heartless monster, and to see one of them crying was tearing what was left of his blackened heart apart. He saw Mira as his best friend, always there when he wanted to talk and silent when he didn't feel like talking. The true friend is the one you can be silent with, or something along those lines. Wendy is a younger sister he never had. He thought her throughout the years as best as he could. Even though their Dragon Slayer magic wasn't the same, he was a better teacher to her than anyone else could be aside from dragons, but they disappeared without a trace. The island and the palace never once being seen. I killed my little sister," Elfman said with a wail. Natsu's vision bled red as he stood up, letting go of Mira and making his way toward Elfman. As his anger spiked, so did his magic as a spark escaped, dancing around him. Natsu walked up to him and stood in front of the white-haired man. Everyone watching his every move carefully, but no one was prepared as Natsu's eyes narrowed suddenly and he spat on the ground in front of Elfman. "And here I believed you when you said you will protect them." "Disgrace," the Dragon Prince hissed with venom before he turned around and looked at Mira, who was staring at him in shock. 2 years later, gah, Lucy cried in annoyance as she walked down the busy road, ignoring the strange looks some bypassers sent her way at her outburst. Is my sex appeal only worth 1,000 jewels? Kira, squealed some girl loudly as she ran beside her so quickly she almost knocked the blonde off of her feet. At least 10 other girls followed after her. Kira, that sounds familiar. Wait, the Kira, isn't he that famous wizard from Fairy Tail? Lucy asked excitedly as she turned around and followed the running group of girls. It didn't take long to reach a large group of people gathered around someone. In the center of a group, which largely consisted of female population, Lucy noted, stood a man with purple hair, black shirt, dark red pants and a purple cloak. One look at the man sent her heart pounding faster, the blood rushing to her head. What is this feeling? Is this love? Her heart felt as if it would burst from her chest. Oh, it must be. Lucy started walking toward the man who eyed her curiously before winking at her. Oh, dear God, she felt like she would melt. She moved closer, lost in the man's charming smile, a stupidly big smile stretching her lips. The smile disappeared in a second when someone pushed her accidentally. She blinked, the haze disappearing as she eyes Kira, who didn't seem all that charming anymore. What the? Blonde looked back at the person who pushed her. The man was wearing a black trench coat over a dark gray sleeveless shirt with blue markings along with baggy pants in a lighter shade of gray tucked into black boots. She raised an eyebrow when she noticed the stranger's short pink hair that spiked in every direction. That was new. A blue-haired girl around 12 or 13 pushed her way through the crowd and stopped behind the coat-wearing man who was watching Kira with a blank face, his head cocked to the side as if he was curious, but nothing else from his body language indicated he was. It was unnerving, to say the least. In girl's arms, crossed over her chest, was a white cat in a pink dress that looked extremely annoyed at somebody that Lucy quickly realized was a blue-furred cat tugging the girl's green dress. Tearing her eyes away from the strange sight, she turned toward Kira, who was staring at the newcomer with utter terror. The pink head just finished whatever he was saying. So you are the Kira of Fairy Tail, huh? I heard a lot about you, the pink head said nonchalantly. I am sure you have. There is no person in Fury who hasn't heard of my name. Do you mind showing me your guild mark? I would like to compare it with mine. Kira choked, blinking rapidly as he looked at the pink head who kept staring at him with those unnerving black soulless eyes. Glancing at the girls around them which were watching the two carefully, he smiled. Sure. The Fairy Tail mage moved to take off his coat, but he suddenly twisted his hands, yelling, Shadow Blast. A purple magical circle flashed in front of the man, a giant black beam erupting from it, rushing at the pink-haired man who sighed, raising his hand lazily. The spell exploded around the man, and before Lucy could even reach for the golden keys attached to her belt, the spell disappeared, the man still standing, not a hair on him touched. The fangirls around them quickly ran away after seeing this. Lucy heard a blue-haired girl that still stood beside her speaking up, That's a bad idea. What's a bad idea? Lucy asked, confused, still not quite understanding how the guy went unscathed from that blast. It's a bad idea to take Natsu's moniker, the blue-haired girl explained as if it was obvious, and not to mention that guy attacked him. Oh, wait. You're the girl Natsu accidentally pushed, right? I'm sorry about that. My name's Wendy, by the way. These two are Carla and Happy. Wendy pointed at White Cat first and then at the blue. Yo. The blue cat replied, much to Lucy's surprise and shock. Nice to meet you, Carla replied. The cats waved at her happily while she stared at them. Talking cats, go figure. Oh, no need to apologize. I should be thanking you, really. That guy was using some forbidden charm magic. The name's Lucy, Lucy said, making a face at the thought before she realized what Wendy said a moment earlier. Did you say the guy used his moniker? Before Wendy could reply, Kira flew between them, ultimately crashing into the wall of the building nearby. Lucy's jaw fell open as she looked at the pink-haired teen who was dusting his hands, his face expression still blank. That should teach you not to use someone's name for your dirty fantasies, the man spoke. Lucy stared at the man for a moment before she glanced at Wendy, who was shaking her head in what appeared to be amused disbelief. That's when she noticed a blue tattoo on girl's left shoulder. A fairy with a tail. His moniker, does that mean? Holy shit. Lucy turned her head away from the unconscious mage toward the pinkhead who was walking toward Wendy, hands pushed in the pockets of his coat. He is Kira. He's the mage people refer to as Soulless Fairy. Wendy cringed as she glanced at Natsu, who was watching the blonde-haired woman impassively. After a moment she nodded, yup. My brother's one of the strongest fairy tale mages. Your brother. Her eyes wanted to pop out of her head. She was staring at the pink-haired teen who stood there silently and then back at Wendy. They didn't look really that much alike in her opinion. The silence didn't last long as Wendy turned toward Natsu and huffed, "You told me I'll take care of this job." "Ah, my apologies Wendy. He was going on my nerves with that high and mighty attitude." "Let's call the Rune Knights and get home," Natsu spoke tonelessly. It was really starting to annoy the blonde mage. The body language was practically unexisting in this man. As the four turned around to walk away, the blue cat spoke, "Hey Wendy. Do you think I could get some fish before we go?" "Sure thing, Happy. Though you'll have to make Natsu buy it for you. I don't have any money with me." Happy's tail dropped down as he glanced at Natsu, who didn't even bother to look back, responding, "Not a chance, Excuse me, can I go with you? I want to join Fairy Tale so." Lucy asked hopefully before the four could get too far. Wendy looked back at her, Carla and Happy turning soon after her, but Natsu kept walking, pretending he didn't hear her. "I don't need some busty blonde getting on my nerves all the way to Magnolia," Natsu mused as he glanced at the sky. "They should be back before the night falls if they leave now." "Sure, feel free to come with us. Master Makarov is always happy when new members join," Wendy said with smile, ignoring the huff coming from Natsu before the pink-haired dragon slayer spotted a Rune Knight, walking immediately toward him, and after the two exchanged few words, the Rune Knight hurried towards the unconscious man named Bora that tried to impersonate Natsu. "Really? Awesome. Thank you so much," Lucy said as she ran to catch up with them. The moment she reached them, her mouth opened, the questions immediately firing at the blue head, who looked a bit put out by the number of questions the older girl had. "Did she really have to come with us?" Natsu asked no one in particular while looking in front of himself, black eyes fixed on the horizon. "Don't be rude Natsu. If she wants to join then of course, she will come with us," said Carla in her motherly tone, crossing her white arms over her chest. Natsu sighed as he cracked his fingers. He didn't say anything after that. They went together to train station, soon finding an empty cabinet when they got on the train and sat down. Natsu sat next to the window with a thoughtful face. When the train began to move, Lucy noticed that Natsu rapidly turning green. "Is he okay?" Lucy asked, concerned. "Yeah, he's fine," Happy said, munching on a fish. Lucy's sweat dropped. "Where did he get that fish?" she asked herself. "He has terrible motion sickness," Carla explained. Lucy looked at Natsu, feeling sorry for the guy. She quickly looked away when he glanced at her and glared upon noticing her look. It was quiet for a while, Lucy trying to find a way to break the awkward silence, Natsu watching through the window and Wendy and Katz just sitting there. After few moments, Lucy once again began to talk. Endlessly. "Does she ever shut up?" thought Natsu, a hand over his mouth trying to get his stomach back in place. "Hoa, this place is huge," Lucy said, looking at Fairy Tale Guild building. Natsu looked up for a moment before his eyes dropped down again. "I still don't understand why people make a big deal of this place. It's not that big." The five stood in front of the closed doors of the building while Lucy admired the size of the place. Sighing soundlessly, Natsu moved forward, the four quickly following him. As Natsu pushed the doors open, Lucy's jaw dropped. Beer, chairs, tables and even wizards were flying everywhere. "What is this?" Lucy said, trying to be heard over one of Fairy Tale's famous fights. "They are really loud," said Wendy, covering her ears, but she had a smile on her face. "Annoying is what they are if you ask me," Natsu muttered, looking at Wendy, who was the only one that heard him. The girl giggled, moving inside. With eyes fixed on Lucy, who was walking past him, the bottle that flew into his head was left ignored. As the sound of shattering filled the entrance, Wendy looked at Natsu, completely horrified. Natsu's eye twitched for a second, but his body didn't move much as he slowly turned to look at the suddenly silent guild hall. Happy looked at Natsu from behind Wendy, his cheeks puffed out as he tried to stay serious. Carla looked at him and jerked an elbow in his ribs. Happy pouted as he looked at her. The white cat just raised her nose. The dragon prince looked at the members of the hall. His hair soaked with beer that slowly dripped down to his clothes. After another long moment, one member let out a terrified shriek and ran through the window. "Who threw that bottle?" Natsu hissed out as the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. All members who were still in the room showed to the trembling man who was under a table. Lucy was somewhat surprised a man his size managed to squeeze himself underneath it so quickly after the first member ran out. The white-haired man glanced at Natsu who was walking toward him on hand warped in black and blue energy. Once in front of the table, Natsu raised magic-coated fist ready to shatter the desk and the man underneath it when a new voice boomed over the silent hall. That would be enough, Natsu. Lucy turned around, almost fainting when she saw a giant as tall as ceiling looking down at them. Natsu lowered his fist on the table, the magic disappeared around his fist but the wood still cracked. With a tch, he turned around and walked toward the stairs disappeared on the second floor. The white-haired man underneath the table let out a sigh of relief but didn't move to get out from underneath it. Lucy watched in complete shock as the giant looked at her before he started shrinking to the point where he was standing barely above her knees. "New member?" asked old man seriously. "Why yes," Lucy stuttered. "Yo," Makarov said with a grin as he extended his hand for Lucy to shake it. "I'm Makarov Drayar, master of fairy tale. He is the fairy tale master!" Exclamation mark single quote. Lucy watched the man in shock as she shook his hand. "Lucy. ... My name's Lucy. Did you get your fairy tale symbol?" asked Makarov with a grin as he looked at Wendy. "Good to see you're all back safe and sound, Wendy, Carla." Happy and Carla nodded with a smile as Wendy replied, "It's good to back but you know we were safe and sound all the time." "Natsu was with yous, of course," Makarov smiled as he looked at Lucy who answered, "No, I didn't." "Then go to Mira. She's at the bar," Master explained. "Thank you," Lucy said happily as she turned and started walking to the bar. "What were you thinking? I don't care if you hit each other but to hit Natsu. If I hadn't come this would very badly finish." Lucy could hear Master yelling but there was no anger in his voice. He sounded amused actually. "I'll take you to Mira if you want," Wendy offered. Lucy looked at the smaller girl and smiled thankfully. As they moved closer to the bar there was only one girl standing behind it, cleaning the glasses as she talked to two guys, one with a cigar and the other with blue hair and mustache. When she saw Mira's face she realized who Mira was. "Mira Jane Strauss," Lucy cried. "Yes. What is it? Oh, do you need anything?" the white-haired girl asked, raising her head to look who called her. "You're even more beautiful in person," Lucy cried again. She admired Mira Jane since Sorcerer Weekly put her photo for the first time into the famous magazine. "Thank you." Mira Jane seemed slightly surprised by the sudden compliment but quickly smiled again. "It seems that I'm at disadvantage here. You know who I am, but I do not know who you are." "Oh, right, I'm Lucy. I'm the new member. Master Makarov sent me here so I can get my fairy tale symbol." "Really? Well that's wonderful," said Mira, her smile turning into a grin as she took out the stamp with fairy tale symbol. "Where and what color?" "Pink. Right hand, please," Lucy cried excitedly. Mira pressed the stamp and when it was moved on Lucy's hand was pink fairy tale sign. "We have a new member," Mira cried as the members cheered. "Look Wendy," Lucy said as she turned to the bluehead who was sitting on a chair next to the bar. "It looks great Lucy," Wendy said with a grin. The happiness of another member joining soon turned into a party that seemed to occur in this guild on daily basis from what Lucy gathered. "So how did you get to the guild hall?" asked drunk Makarov with a mug full of beer in his hand. "I get here with Natsu and Wendy while they were on a job," Makarov spat his beer attracting the attention of other members. "You came here with Natsu?" cried Makarov. "WHAAAATTT. Everybody cried out in disbelief. On the railing on the second floor, Natsu sat staring at the party with a blank face, a glass with what appeared to be whiskey in his hand as he muttered, "Wendy asked her to come with us. If it was just me I would have left her there, worrying." Lucy drawled out with her eyes half closed and her head on the bar, with juice in her hand. 3 days have passed since Lucy joined and the only interesting thing that happened since she joined were 5 more fights. "Why don't you ask someone to go out on a job with you?" asked Mira Jane, wiping the glass behind the bar. "I don't know who could I even go with and I don't want to go alone," Lucy said, taking a sip of her apple juice. "I still find it hard to believe that Natsu brought you here," said Levy as she took a seat at the bar next to Lucy. Flashback asterisk. "I got here with Natsu and Wendy," Lucy said. Makarov spat his beer attracting the attention of other members. "You came here with Natsu?" Makarov cried out. "WHAAAATTT. cried everybody. Lucy straightened in her seat as all eyes turned towards her. Why is that so surprising? Well, Wendy was the one that really let me come with them. You must be super strong then, shouted someone. You don't seem all that impressing to me, muttered shirtless teenager who was sitting on the bar not too far from her. He grinned suddenly as he looked at her, but then again this is the first time Natsu brought someone in the guild. Lucy stayed quiet, not sure what to think of the comment. Should she even be offended? Gray, you're close. A girl with a barrel between her crossed legs said from a nearby table before she took another gulp directly from the barrel. I know, Gray said waving a hand through the air dismissingly. I think I left it somewhere on the way to the guild. What kind of magic do you use? Asked Makarov. Oh, I use celestial spirit magic, Lucy said with a smile as she took out her key collection, 3 golden and several silver keys shining in the light. So how did you meet Natsu and Wendy anyway? Kana asked from her spot on the table. Lucy took a deep breath before she went into a detailed retelling of the story. Once she was done, Gray laughed, soon followed by several others. That sounds like him, end of flashback. Why is everyone afraid of him? I mean, he doesn't look that scary to me, Lucy said with a puzzled expression. Well, when he first joined the guild he defeated without too much trouble some of the guild members that were older than him by at least a decade, Levy said with a finger on her chin, thinking about the past. I still don't really see it, Lucy said, nervously smiling. Wait, I didn't even get to the why is he really scary part, said Levy with a smug smirk, quite sure what reaction she will receive. Natsu uses the Chaos Dragon Slayer magic that he learned from his foster father and his foster father's Acnologia, Levy said, and shivers running through her spine. Acnologia? Lucy asked, confused as the familiar name rolled down her tongue. Dragon King Acnologia. That Acnologia. She cried, attracting the attention of other members who looked at her uneasily before several glanced up at the second floor. Yes, that Acnologia, but tried to keep it down, Levy said. Many members aren't comfortable with mentioning him. Natsu's a bit touchy on that subject, and that's not all, Mira said as she listened to their conversation. It's not? Asked trembling Lucy. She was slowly getting an idea why is everybody afraid of Natsu. He killed 18 dragons before he joined the guild, said Mira whispering. And there is a rumor he even killed humans. And I don't mean dark mages. I mean villagers. Lucy looked at Mira horrified. Then gulped. That wasn't scary. That was horrifying. How strong is he? Asked Lucy, fear entering her voice. Well, to be honest, no one really knows since he has not been seen at 100%, Levy said. But if you want to know something more about him you should talk to Mira or Wendy, said Levy. It's okay, I think I know enough, Lucy said, completely white. Okay, so to change the subject, with who did you decide to go on a mission? Asked Mira. That's a good question, Lucy said, thinking. I would invite you to come with Shadow Gear, but Droy and Jet said that they need a little time off, said Levy. It's okay, Lucy said, smiling. You can go with us, said Urza as she overheard the conversation. Lucy looked at the scarlet-haired mage with a smile. She met her yesterday, but Lucy could tell she was a good person, if a bit weird at the times. Really? That's great, I'll be happy to go with you. Who else is going? Said Lucy happily. Gray, me and maybe Wendy if she wants, said Urza. Great, said Lucy, excited. Her first mission, finally. Lucy, you go ask Wendy and I will go with Gray to pick the job, Urza instructed with a smile as she walked to the Gray to brief him on the change of plans. That sounds great, Lucy said as she stood up. Lucy went to find Wendy with excitement bubbling beneath her skin. It didn't take her long to spot the blue-haired girl, though her excitement was short-lived when she noticed the spiky pink hair next to hers. Now she wanted that Urza or Gray was with her. She wasn't sure why she was acting like that when she saw Natsu. Maybe it was the stories or his demeanor and the way he held himself, but he had interesting ability to make her feel as tiny as an ant with a simple look. Wendy had a plate filled with pasta in front of herself, picking it up with her chopsticks, talking to Happy and Carla who ate their own meal. Natsu sat on the opposite side of the table, a bowl of miso soup in front of him. Lucy approached the table, and since he was facing right toward her, Natsu first noticed her. He put down his chopsticks and looked at her quietly before speaking up in monotone. Need anything, or have you come here to gawk at us? I wanted to. Lucy stuttered. Hey Lucy, we picked the job. Is Wendy coming? Asked Urza as she approached. When she noticed Natsu, she stopped in her tracks looking at the dragon slayer who looked at her. Wendy looked from Lucy to Urza with a surprised look on her face. "You want me to go with you?" "We would be happy," Urza replied with smile, forcing her eyes away from Natsu, whose blank eyes narrowed slightly into a glare. "Sure. What's the job?" Wendy asked. "We have to find the magic item called Lullaby and return it to Magic Council," Gray said, walking to the group. "Lullaby?" Natsu's eyes widened. "Is he serious? Why would Magic Council send a job to find that as a regular job? Are they even aware what they are asking for? Idiots!" He stood up from his seat suddenly, making the three standing mages take a step back. The pink-haired mage walked to Urza and yanked the paper with job description from her hands. "Hey, Natsu, we took that job first," Urza yelled after getting over initial shock. Makarov, hearing the commotion, looked at the source of it. Realizing what was happening, he said, "Natsu, Urza's right. They took the job first." Natsu walked to Master with job request and pushed the paper in Master's hand. "This should be an S-class job at least," Natsu stated with a blank face. Master looked at the job request and his eyes widened slightly. After few more seconds, he nodded. "You're right. So what?" asked annoyed Urza. "I am an S-class mage just like you. You are nowhere near the main level. You're too weak," Natsu said bluntly. Makarov ignored Natsu's comment while Gray had to hold Urza so she wouldn't make a stupid mistake and attack him. "That wouldn't be pretty." Master looked at her and then at Natsu. Sighing again, he said, "She is right, Natsu, but since you're so concerned about them, you should go with them," said Makarov. "What?" Urza and Gray yelled in unison. "First, I'm not worried, and second, like hell I would go with them," Natsu hissed. "Yeah, we don't need him to go with us. We don't want him to go with us," Gray and Urza yelled. "I made my mind. Natsu, you are going with them and that's final," Makarov said seriously, leaving no room for argument. The old man turned his back to them, his lips stretching in a malicious smile that made Mira, who saw him, feel uneasy. "This is going to be so much fun to watch," he thought to himself before he frowned for a second, "as long as they don't destroy too much." The old man stood up and turned to look at Mira. "I should get going if I don't want to be late for meeting. Good luck and safe journey," Mira said with a smile, waving. Master walked out of the guild and left Natsu, Urza, and Gray speechless. "So, it looks we'll all go together," said Wendy, trying to cheer them up. She was sure that if the looks could kill, Makarov would already be dead from the murderous glare Natsu sent after him. "Yes, it looks so," said Urza with a sigh. "We'll head out tomorrow morning. Get to the main train station at 8 o'clock. Don't be late," Natsu said as he walked out of the guild. Next morning, Natsu's black eyes stayed focused on the clock in the middle of Magnolia train station. 7:59. The tick-tock of the clock only heard by his sensitive ears as the people around him moved through the station. 8 o'clock. The black eyes scanned the crowd, his ears searching for the familiar sound. 8:01. "They are late," said Natsu to no one in particular. There was no one around him after all that would care to listen. After a few more minutes of waiting, he heard Wendy, Gray, and Lucy coming. Carla and Happy seemed to be with them as well. Now only Titania, Natsu thought as he stood on the same spot stoically. "I bet he won't even come," he could hear Gray saying. "Don't say that, I can smell him. He is already here, and besides, he's never late," Wendy explained as she readjusted the backpack on her shoulder. By the time Wendy finished saying that, they could already see him. "That is true, I'm never late, but that I can't say for you," Natsu replied emotionlessly. "We're not that late, and besides we have 10 minutes before the train leaves," Gray waved his hand uncaringly before looking around. "Where's Urza?" Not a moment after, he said that they could spot a large mountain of stuff on a small wagon dragged by the mentioned wizard. "I'm sorry I'm late, hit me," Urza said. Lucy looked at the scarlet-haired girl in confusion, turning to look at Happy, who shrugged. "It's not a problem, really. We just arrived ourselves." Wendy's sweat dropped. "Oh, well then, I guess I can forgive myself. Now that we're all here, we can get on the train," Urza said. Natsu paled slightly, though it was hardly visible on his naturally pale skin. "Train?" he repeated. "You are still afraid of vehicles. Ha 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 ha. Great Kira is afraid of vehicles," Gray said, laughing, but the laughter died down soon enough when Natsu's fist connected with his head. "I am not afraid," Natsu hissed, vein popping out on his forehead. "I just don't like them." We have to go on once I say we leave now, Urza said as she eyed the pink-haired mage carefully. I have a better idea, Natsu said with a sinister smirk stretching his lips that sent shivers through their spine. And what would that be? Asked Lucy carefully. I think I know, Wendy muttered as she looked at her brother in fear. They all looked at Wendy and when they saw her they were officially terrified. They've never seen that Wendy was afraid of Natsu. Join hands, Natsu instructed. As Wendy took hold of Natsu's hand others soon followed albeit no one looked even remotely enthusiastic about it. Underneath them appeared black magic circle and they could hear Natsu whispering, Dragon Slayer Lost Art, Chaotic Void. Lucy let out a surprised shriek when a black hole appeared beneath them, the group of 7 dropping into it before the hole closed behind them leaving the people on the station gaping in shock at the sudden departure of the mages. A black hole appeared on the floor of another station, people around it quickly jumping away as Natsu emerged from inside it as if nothing happened while the rest of his guildmates lied sprawled on the floor as if the water carried them here. They groaned trying to sit up but as soon as they did that they had strong urge to throw up as their headache skyrocketed. They could barely see in front of them from all the black dots decorating their vision. What did you do? Asked Urza holding her head with one hand and with other her stomach. He used his teleportation spell, said Happy also holding his head and sitting up. Nausea will stop soon. I am quite sure that a headache won't be there too long as well, Natsu said with a smirk. Great, Gray muttered as he bent over to the side and threw up. You could have at least warned us, Lucy whined turning green at the sight of Gray. Natsu looked at her with unimpressed face before looking around the station. It didn't take the Dragon Prince long to take notice of Rune Knights talking about a dark guild. They say that guy Aragorn stole some sealed magic, one said. The other nodded. It's true. They are on Oshibana Station as we speak, Aragorn the Shinigami, the strongest member of Eisenwald, Natsu mused ignoring the sound of Lucy as her stomach betrayed her and she threw up on the floor behind him. Eisenwald and some sealed magic. That must be guild that took Lullaby. Natsu started walking to one of the Rune Knights while others were trying to recover from their headaches. When he came close to Rune Knights they looked at him and nodded in respect much to Urza's, Gray's and Lucy's surprise. Did you come here to take down Eisenwald? One of the Rune Knights asked. If they have what I seek, yes. Is it certain that they are on Oshibana Station? Natsu questioned in a flat voice. We got the message that one member of Eisenwald was spotted on a train that goes to Oshibana Station. Rune Knight explained pointing at the train that stood on the station, some Rune Knights moving inside. There is no reason only one member would go there if the others weren't waiting. Natsu nodded in thanks before he turned and looked at the train with a small sense of dread well hidden behind a sigh. It seems that I have to go on that monstrosity anyway. His cold eyes turned to Urza who managed to stand up while he talked to the Rune Knights who now noticed the downed mages and looked at Natsu. Should we arrest them? One of them asked uncertainly. No, they are with me. The two looked at Natsu before spotting the blue-haired girl and nodded. Wendy was with him often enough for them to recognize her after all. What was that all about? Urza demanded as she walked to him, the two Rune Knights moving away. Natsu's eyes flickered at her as he spoke. Drop the attitude, Titania. Respect those stronger than you. Urza glared at him. Maybe you are stronger in terms of power but you are a lousy excuse for a comrade. I never asked to be yours. Urza bristled for a moment before she turned to the Rune Knights that were now too far to hear the two. What were you talking about with them? I might know where Lullaby is, then why didn't you say so immediately? Don't raise your voice on me. Urza blinked at the sudden pressure that weighed on her as Natsu's glare met her eyes. With a shiver, she looked away and nodded. The Dragon Prince turned to look at the magic four-wheeler further down the road before he said to Urza, I'm going on the train and you go to Oshibana Station. Urza nodded after a second, not willing to argue anymore. She tried to show the pinkhead his way of talking down to everyone was not making it any easier to him but he always seemed to see it in a completely wrong way. The short argument always ending with Urza getting the glare from the Dragon Prince. And you don't mess with Natsu when he sends you the glare. Before she could say anything else Natsu dropped into the ground using the Chaotic Void spell. Let's go, Urza yelled to the mages that were only now able to stay on their feet. The six quickly moved toward the magic four-wheeler, Urza sitting in the driver's spot. Natsu took a deep breath, trying to catch the scent only to lean over the window and throw up. Damn trains. A look of utter disgust crossed his face. The smell of people around him definitely didn't help. Seriously, Didn't they here for a shower? Natsu could swear he could see green rising from one man. Natsu gave a tch. Humans, deciding it would be better to sit somewhere and then try to find the member. Natsu walked to the first empty seat and without a word sat down on it. A man in white coat and spiky ponytail sat across from him, and as he sat down the man looked up at the pink-haired mage. "Are you okay? You look sick," the man spoke after a moment as Natsu sniffed the air again. Natsu nodded as he looked at the man carefully. Well, talk about coincidence. Not that Natsu believed in them. The guy reeked of snakes. If he was not the one Natsu was looking for, then he's not on this train at all. The man spotted his guild mark and smiled sharply. "So you are from a legal guild? I envy you," the man said. Natsu raised his eyebrow at this. "And that's fairy tale mark, isn't it?" "Yes, it is. Your guild has a lot of beautiful girls." Man continued. "There's Urza, Titania, Scarlet, Mira Jane, She-Devil, Strauss, gods, she'd make a nice whore." Natsu gripped the armrest, the wood denting underneath his finger as he leveled the man with a glare. The man was more concentrated on the guild mark to notice Natsu was trying to lit him on fire with his look. "I really envy you." Natsu's face remained blank if slightly green as he pushed any sign of anger down and inwardly smirked. "Good thing that he doesn't know who I am," the man smirked again. "My guild doesn't have many beautiful ladies. You must think that you legal guilds are much better. Well, do you know how we call you? We call you flies. You are pathetic flies to us, you stupid fairies." The man yelled as he jumped to his feet and swung his fist at Natsu. Natsu caught the incoming fist with one hand, the other on his mouth. The sudden movement made the flute with a skull with 3 eyes on it fall out from the man's white pocket. Natsu smirked. "I found you. Now that you saw the flute you can't leave the train," the man yelled. "My name is Kageyama and I will be your executioner." "Dream, on," Natsu muttered as he bent over the window again. "You're disgusting," Kageyama said as he moved to punch the dragon prince in the face. Natsu caught him by the wrist once again. "Chaotic void," Natsu mumbled, holding back another urge to vomit. "What was that?" Kageyama asked. Below Natsu appeared magic circle and he disappeared. Kageyama's eyes widened. "Fuck, what am I going to say to Aragorn? That guy has seen the flute. Damn it," Kageyama yelled in frustration. No sooner than he yelled that the train shocked dangerously, and a moment later wind tornado burst through the roof, warping around him. "Shit." As the wind disappeared, so did Kageyama. The only evidence the mage was even here was the hole left in the roof. Oshibana Station ** Urza and the others made their way to Oshibana Station in record time. No sooner than Urza stopped the magical car, she jumped down and pushed her way through the crowd gathered at the entrance of the station. "What's going on?" Urza asked one of the Rune Knights. The knight looked at her with raised eyebrow. "Civilians should let this be handled." He was interrupted by Urza's fist that met his face, knocking him out cold in a second. "I'm not a civilian. I'm here to help," Urza said as she glared at the downed man. Wendy, Lucy, Gray, Happy and Carla stared dumbfounded. "Yay, that is really obvious," Gray thought sarcastically. "Why not beat the people you are trying to help?" Urza went to another knight, either ignoring or most likely not noticing the looks her guild members sent her way. "What's going on?" Urza repeated. Seeing the faith of his companion, the knight spoke. A dark guild. Too slow." The scarlet-haired mage moved to another knight. "Is she aware that she would found out what she's looking for sooner if she let that guy finish rather than moving to the next one?" Lucy seemed troubled. "That's Urza for ya," Happy replied just as Urza moved towards them. "It seems that dark guild Eisenwald is behind Thiz's," she motioned to the station. "I think that they have some connection with our job." "That's right," Natsu spoke as he rose from the ground, making the 6 jump at his sudden appearance. "Natsu, did you find anything?" Lucy asked, but Natsu didn't even turn his head to her. Lucy's sweat dropped. "Is he ignoring me?" Lucy asked, turning Wendy. Wendy smiled nervously. "It looks like it," Lucy sighed. "Let's go inside," Natsu said, not even looking at them. "Right," the 6 answered as they followed the pinkhead. The Rune Knights once again moved out of Natsu's way as the Dragon Prince gave them the smallest nod of thanks, barely noticed by them. Natsu opened the doors of the station and slipped inside as quiet as wind. The 6 behind him moving but less quietly. A strong smell of copper hit their noses, the tiles of the station covered in crimson. Lucy barely sustained herself from letting out a scream as she looked inside, almost falling over the downed knight that lied on the floor. Gray grabbed her arm. a deep frown on his face as he carefully moved around the knight. Looking around, it was evident the knight at the doors was not the only one. "Are they dead?" Lucy asked, holding her hand across her mouth. "Yes," Natsu deadpanned. "Are you sure? I can't hear their heartbeats," Natsu said with a blank face as he stepped over one body. "Oh my god," Lucy said, then she realized what Natsu said. "How could you hear their hearts if you're 2 meters away from them?" she asked. Natsu looked at her. "I use dragon-slaying magic and my senses are much stronger than those of a human." "That sounded like you're not human yourself," Gray said. "Did I ever said I am?" Natsu smiled at the ice mage, closing his eyes and cocking his head to the side. A shiver passed through Gray's back at the sight. They climbed up the stairs to the second floor and there they could see all members of Eisenwald sitting or standing in a circle around 2 mages arguing. "How could you let him go?" asked an angry silver-haired man looking at the man that Natsu recognized as Kageyama. Without a warning to his guildmates, Natsu moved closer to the members of Eisenwald further from the 2 arguing members. A member noticed Natsu immediately and jumped to his feet looking at the man in shock. "Who the hell are you?" The white-haired man looked at them, shifting the scythe on his shoulder. "It looks like we have guests." He then noticed Natsu's right shoulder, and it seems that they are flies. He smiled viciously. "Aragorn the Shinigami," Natsu said as he looked at the man. "That's the Shinigami?" Lucy and Gray asked, shocked. "Why, I'm flattered. You know who I am," Aragorn replied with a snicker. "Give us lullaby and nobody will get hurt." Urza stepped forward. "Yeah, and what are you even planning to do with it, anyway? You know what it does, right?" Gray spoke up as he glared at the Eisenwald's strongest member. Aragorn looked at him for a second before a grin split his face again. The silver-haired man jumped in the air and instead of falling down he continued floating, moving upwards towards speakers of the station. Wendy's eyes narrowed slightly. Wind magic. When they saw him put his hand on speakers their eyes widened. "I assume you know that lullaby is a cursed object. Everybody who hears its song except the player will die," Aragorn said smiling. "Why would you do that?" asked Wendy, disgust evident in her voice. "We are angry that Magical Council took away our rights," Aragorn yelled as he gestured at his fellow guild members who cried in agreement. "You won't get your rights back by doing this," Lucy yelled at him. "We don't want our rights back," Aragorn said with a scoff before he raised his fist, with scythe tightly grasped in it. "We want revenge." Aragorn yelled as loud as he could, his friends cheering around them. "You're planning to kill thousands of innocent people." Gray stomped his feet on the ground, outraged. "Gray, quiet down," Natsu spoke dispassionately. "How can you be so calm? They are planning to kill thousands of innocent people." Urza yelled at him. "They are planning but they won't succeed," Natsu replied as slightly maddened smirk stretched his lips. Urza looked at him for a second before she calmed down a bit and smiled a little. "You're right, I would like to stay at the party but I have to go." "You know, places to go, things to do," Aragorn laughed again watching from above as fairy tale mages prepared for the fight. The gust of wind formed around Aragorn who crossed his legs and sat on thin air, flying out of the station through the window. As soon as Aragorn was out of their sight Eisenwald members turned to the group of 7 and with a battle cry, first member rushed at them, quickly followed by rest while Kageyama and another member rushed outside of the room. "Natsu, Gray, go after them," Urza yelled as a sword appeared in her hand, blocking the attack of one member. "You can't tell me what to do," Natsu muttered. "You're lucky that's what I planned on doing anyway." Gray didn't even bother to reply as he ran after them. Urza sighed at Natsu's comment but turned to the enemy at hand ignoring the Dragon Slayer at the moment. "Wendy, Lucy, you'll help me," Urza instructed. "Right," they said in unison. "Requip, Heaven's Wheel Armor," Urza yelled and her body was then wrapped in gold light. When the light died down she was standing in different armor set. The silver armor was quite a sight to see along with the swords flying around. "Dance, my blades," Urza cried as she outstretched her hand toward the members of Eisenwald. The swords began to spin rapidly around her before they were sent flying toward the members of Eisenwald. "Whoa, what kind of magic is that?" Lucy asked as she watched Urza dance a deadly dance with the enemy, her armor changing in a second as she ducked under one swing and parried another. "That's requip magic," Happy answered with a smirk as, "Go Urza. Urza's special because she can requip her armors as well," Carla added. A sound of vacuum near her brought Lucy's eyes on Wendy. "Sky Dragon's Roar," cried Wendy. A large tornado exploded from her mouth, rushing towards several unlucky members, sending them flying. Lucy just stayed silent, shocked beyond belief. Wendy uses dragon-slaying magic like Natsu, Carla explained, seeing Lucy's expression. Yeah, she was raised by Sky Dragon Grandini, Happy exclaimed. Deciding she spent enough time watching, Lucy reached for one of her keys, and as she pulled out a golden key she pushed it into the air. Gate of Giant Crab, I open thee, Cancer. In front of Lucy appeared a black-haired man with red cornrows. Fish, Happy cried in delight, drooling. Carla facepalmed at his childish actions. What can I do for you, Miss Lucy? Cancer asked Lucy. A new haircut, Ebby. Lucy sweet-dropped. No, I don't need a haircut. Can you take care of these clowns? Everything for you, Miss Lucy. Ebby. Cancer bowed slightly before he rushed toward the members, cutting their clothes and hair, distracting them long enough for Lucy to kick them unconscious. Not even 10 minutes later, Urza landed between Lucy and Wendy. I believe we did a fairly good job, she concluded as she looked at the downed mages. Requip, Urza cried, and once again glowing light wrapped around her body, and when it died down she was wearing her normal Heart Cruise armor. Kageyama was running down the halls of station holding his bleeding arm. The man looked over his shoulder, scared for his life. The deep gash that ran down his arm sustained from a brief moment. Natsu caught him before the Eisenwald member managed to run away, and the more time passed the more he realized that Natsu let him get away. There is no point in running away, Natsu called from somewhere behind him. Kageyama's steps echoed through the empty hallway, but Natsu's were unheard, silent as a ghost. I can hear your every step. Kageyama looked behind him, his eyes wide as he felt the breath on his neck, but there was no one behind him. I can hear your breathing. Kageyama's head jerked in front of himself where the voice had come from, not a meter away, but once again there was no one there. The Eisenwald member reached the end of the hall too soon as he looked around, his frantic eyes almost missing the iron doors that he opened and closed behind himself in a second. He leaned against the iron door, almost hyperventilating. What kind of monster is he? Kageyama asked himself, shuddering as Natsu's mad grin flashed in front of his eyes as the mad wizard slashed him. The silence lasted for few more moments, the only sound Kageyama's own heart as it pounded against his ears. The stillness that fell around the dark mage didn't last long as a hand suddenly flew through the iron door as if they were made of paper and grabbed Kageyama's neck. I can hear your heart beating, and it really annoys me. Kageyama could hear Natsu whispering behind the door. Cold sweat glided down his back as the hand around his neck tightened. The doors started to melt, and Kageyama, instead of intense heat, felt the tremendous cold that crept into his bones, making him shiver. He turned his head to see behind himself. Oh, how he regretted it. When he saw Natsu's face through the hole in the doors that kept getting bigger, he wanted to drop dead. His eyes were cold, evil, with his pupils straight line like those of snakes. His mouth was twisted into a mad smile that would terrify the bravest. Kageyama has never been this scared in my life, shaking uncontrollably while the other teenager held his neck. Natsu moved his free hand slightly, the knuckles cracking before he lit the hands in black and blue chaos magic. What Aragorn plans with the flute? Tell me and I maybe spare your miserable life. Natsu hissed. Mad expression didn't leave his face. He already told you. Kageyama stuttered. Don't lie to me. Natsu's mad expression replaced angry one as he threw the mage across the room into the opposite wall before stepping through the hole in the doors, blocking the only exit Kageyama had. He wants to use the flute on guild masters in Clower Town. Kageyama replied fast. To hell with Aragorn's threats. The guy in front of him was 10 times worse. It wasn't so hard, right? Natsu asked with a wicked grin. The dragon prince moved toward Kageyama, who pushed his back against the wall, much to his demise unable to get further. As Natsu moved even closer, Kageyama braced himself. He had nothing to lose now, anyway, right? Shadow Orochi, he cried as in front of him appeared purple magic seal and from it flown out black snakes made of shadow. Natsu raised his hand and caught the shadowy snakes, cocking his head to the side, closing his eyes as he smiled. Intriguing, Natsu spoke as he clenched his outstretched hand, the snakes disappearing with a wail. I am possible, Kageyama murmured. An incredibly stupid. The dragon prince informed the dark mage, though as the seconds passed it was becoming more and more questionable who the dark one was. Chaos energy sparked around Natsu as he moved closer, ready to kill the mage quickly. What kind of monster are you? Kageyama watched with open horror as Natsu moved closer. The slitted black eyes narrowed. Monster. Maybe slow would be more appropriate. I am the son of the apocalypse, Natsu Souleater, Kira of Fairy Tale. Remember the name when the gates of hell open for you. You will meet many who have fallen down by my hand there, Natsu said, dark energy dancing around him. A second before Natsu could deal the first blow aimed at the man's stomach, a rush of footsteps and new voices called, "Don't hurt him. We need him," Urza yelled. Kageyama stared at the scarlet-haired man in shock before he slumped down in relief. For what? Natsu asked, the annoyance he felt absent from his voice as any other emotion. Aragorn put some sort of wind wall and we can't get out of here, Lucy explained. And we have to get out of here as soon as possible because Aragorn is really planning, Gray started but frowned as Natsu spoke before he finished. I know, I fail to see how he can do anything, Natsu said, pointing to Kageyama, who immediately stiffened when Natsu's attention returned to him. He is the one that unsealed Lullaby, so we think he could unseal Wind Wall. Why Wendy didn't eat it? Natsu asked. I couldn't because it has some sort of protective magic on it. Wendy looked at the floor in shame. It's okay, Natsu assured her. Just as they turned their attention at Kageyama still pressed against the wall, a pair of hands shot from the wall, piercing the mage's stomach. A member of Eisenwald behind Kageyama, poking through the wall, pulled his hands out, trembling as he looked at the fairy tale mages in the room. Natsu's eyes narrowed as he moved faster than anyone could react and grabbed newcomer's head, pulling the man from the wall before turning around and smashing the head against the wall it just came out of. The Eisenwald member didn't manage to let out so much as a startled cry before his head was crushed on the wall, the skull cracking as the blood exploded, spraying Natsu's hand. The fairy tale mages stared at the swirling wind wall surrounding the station through the front doors. Gray sighed as he shifted Kageyama on his back. So, any idea how to get out? Happy asked. Natsu glanced at them. I could take us with Chaotic Void. He wasn't able to finish as all of them yelled in unison, no. Why not? Because we will be useless, Urza muttered, shuddering at the memory. Not a pleasant thought. There's no point. Aragorn is probably almost in Clower Town, Kageyama said weakly. Remind me why we took him. Natsu frowned slightly. Because he was hurt, Urza said as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Obviously, Natsu said sarcastically. However, Kageyama is right. Aragorn is as much as we know in Clower Town already, so we have to hurry. There is another way I might be able to get us out of here, but I might not be able to help you in near future. Natsu spoke after a moment, sounding somewhat reluctant, but it was barely hearable. Great. Do it, Gray said impatiently, not noticing the worried glance Wendy sent older dragon slayers' way. Natsu took a deep breath as the air buzzed with magic energy that started rising. Stand back, Natsu spoke quietly. Dragon Slayer secret art. Element take over. Natsu began to cast the spell as the spark of his magic danced around his shoulder. Everyone except Wendy, who for some reason was horrified, was amazed and shocked because they had never seen Natsu using that spell. Wind Master. Natsu finished. His eyes began to glow with a sky blue color. He held out his hands, clasped together, palm against palm, and wind from wind wall began to move towards them. Slowly, the wall decreased and wind forming it slowed. Natsu's eyebrow furrowed in concentration as the wind seeped towards him, and suddenly there was a barely audible crack heard only by Wendy and himself as the skin on the part of his hand cracked like glass, the skin soon breaking into fragments from the tips of his fingers all the way to his elbow, the blood flowing from the cracks. Once the wind disappeared, Natsu fell to his knees with his hands on the ground, panting. His eyes returned to normal black color as he stared at the ground in front of him. Wendy immediately started running toward him, her eyes watering. She knelt beside him, her hands immediately warped in a soft glow of her healing magic. Why did you do that? You know that it will speed up the process. Wendy yelled as few tears escaped her eyes. Because I didn't want to watch you cry, Natsu said softly. The others were surprised with tenderness in his voice. He raised his hand ready to wipe her tears but quickly decided against it as his eyes glanced at the blood dripping from the cracks. Instead, he pulled her closer and gave her a hug. A second later he pushed himself gently into a straight sitting position and turned his attention to the others. Why are you still here? Do you want that Aragorn reaches the Masters? He asked, his blank expression in place as his hands dropped to his side again. Of course not. Come on, let's go, Urza shouted, pointing at the magic four-wheeler. The scarlet-haired mage didn't bother to see if Lucy, Wendy, Gray, and Katz were following, certain they were, but when heard Wendy shout she realized she was wrong. Come on Carla. Max speed. When they turned towards Wendy she was already high in the sky. The small group moved toward the magic four-wheeler, determined to catch up with the girl. As they seated themselves in the car, Urza in the driver's seat again, she noticed Natsu still sitting on the stone floor in the same spot. Are you coming? She asked. He looked at her sidelong and wheezed as he tried to catch his breath. Need help? She was a little worried. No, I'll catch up with you, Titania, he said as his eyes dropped on the ground again. Okay, if that is what you want. Let's go. She started the magic four-wheeler running, leaving Natsu in the dust. It already started Wendy. I'm sorry. Natsu sighed as he looked at his hands, still bloody and cracked, but not as many thanks to Wendy's brief usage of healing magic. His eyes moved to his left palm and fingers where, beneath the cracked skin that was slowly falling off, black scales could be seen. The skin slowly peeled off from his fingers, the nails falling off together with skin as he watched in morbid fascination as the place where his nails used to be was replaced with talons. 10 more minutes and I'll have my revenge, Aragorn said out loud, humming a melody of some sort under his breath. Beneath him rails of a train were stretching in the distance, standing on the bridge whose bottom was hidden by the fog underneath it. The Shinigami was not in a hurry. Why would he be, anyway? There was no way those fairy tale mages could defeat his whole guild, and even if they managed to do that by some miracle the wind wall is impassable. A shout from behind almost made Aragorn fall to the ground in surprise. There he is. The voice was without a doubt female. Aragorn looked at himself, but by the time he turned around the girl was already above him. Sky Dragon's roar. Wendy cried as she fired the tornado at Aragorn at point-blank range, sending the surprised wizard crashing into the rails below. Aragorn grunted as the rails bent beneath him on the impact. What the? As he looked up his eyes widened, recognizing the girl from their brief encounter. How did you get past my wind wall? Aragorn asked, shocked as he raised to his feet while the girl landed on the ground, the cat that carried her dropping to the ground exhausted. You made a big mistake, Shinigami, Wendy said as she dropped lower into a fighting stance. You underestimated Fairy Tail, Aragorn growled in anger before he yelled, the attack sudden and deadly, Stormbringer. In front of him appeared a magic circle in light purple color, and from it formed a powerful tornado that wound around Wendy. Aragorn smirked in satisfaction as he lost the sight of the girl. The smirk disappeared from his face when a loud sucking sound came from the center of the tornado still circling around the girl. It's good that this isn't the same as Wind Wall, Wendy said after eating the whole tornado. I can eat fizzes. She wiped her mouth as she looked at Aragorn. And I'm sorry to tell you this, but it tastes horrible. Aragorn just watched, not sure what to think of the scene before him. Without a warning, the young dragon slayer jumped into the air and cried, Sky Dragon's crushing fang. His fingers warped in the wind as she rushed at Aragorn with speed that surprised the silver-haired man. Though surprised, Aragorn had little trouble dodging it as he jumped backward, Wendy's fingers brushing the air where he stood not even a second ago. Storm Shred, Aragorn yelled, having enough of just watching as projectiles fired at the bluehead. Wendy ducked as the first two flown above her and then rolled the side to avoid the next three. The last of the projectiles came towards her just as she stood up, grazing her leg. Wendy hissed in pain as the wind bullet pierced her skin. Ignoring the mild pain, she leapt high into the air and cried as loud as she could, Sky Dragon's wing attack. Aragorn jumped away as the attack raised dust around them. Unable to see, the only warning he received the attack was coming was when the girl was already in front of him, the incantation leaving her lips. Sky Dragon's claw. Aragorn didn't have enough time to move his head to the side as Wendy's foot crashed into his head, sending him flying further down the rails, out of the dust cloud. Before he crashed into the rails again, he twisted his body in the air, bringing his scythe out and swinging it down in a slash just as Wendy exited the dust cloud. The energy blast in shape of a wind rushed at the girl, who jumped to the side as soon as she noticed it, but the attack was too wide to dodge, the sharp wind piercing the flesh all the way from shoulder to hip. Wendy dropped from her jump to the ground in a cry of pain, the cut going all the way to the bone where it cut near her shoulder. Wendy, Carla cried in fear as she tried to stand up only to drop to the ground again. I'm fine, Wendy breathed out as she stood up, one hand pressed on the cut, a grimace forming on her face as she applied more pressure. But not for long. Aragorn yelled and prepared new attack, Emera Baram. He crossed his hands and then swiped them down, sending X-like beams of wine down at the girl who didn't manage to dodge fast enough. A scream of pain left Wendy's lips as she was sent flying through the rails, the blood bursting from the new gashes in her mouth. "I'm surprised you're still in one piece," Aragorn remarked as he looked at the bleeding body of the dragon slayer. As she slowly started to sit up, he added, "Or alive, I told you not to underestimate Fairy Tail," Wendy said as she spat a mouthful of blood before she stood up straight. Aragorn raised an eyebrow as he looked at her, but his eyes widened as the injured teen suddenly crunched and launched at him even faster than before. "Dragon Slayer's secret art. Shattering light. Sky drill," she cried as she warped her whole body in wind. Even if Aragorn could dodge her, he didn't move out of the way, too shocked by the speed and power behind the attack coming from a girl that should have been dead already. Wendy hit Aragorn directly in his stomach and the silver-haired wizard's eyes widened even more as blood escaped from his mouth, his consciousness slipping away before he hit the ground. As she landed, Wendy dropped on her hands and knees, panting, trying to catch her breath, ignoring the blood that dripped from the gaping gash on her body. After a moment, she pushed herself to her feet as she moved toward Aragorn, who didn't move. "I'm sorry that I hurt you, but you didn't leave me any other choice. You do not have to apologize to the enemy, Wendy," said Carla as she moved slowly toward Wendy, recovered enough to stand, but it was anybody's question when she would be able to fly again. "Of course, Carla," Wendy said as she sat on the ground next to the fallen mage. She looked at him for a moment before she sighed and bent over, ripping the scarf that was warped around Mage's neck and then pressing it on her wounds, tying it around it. It was sad, in Wendy's opinion, that wounds like this didn't present much trouble when healing, but she was still unable to heal herself. The good side of it all was that she healed faster than most people. Carla looked at Wendy, nodding in approval before the cat noticed the flute that lied next to Aragorn. She walked to it and picked the flute up, carrying it to Wendy. "It seems that our work here is done," Carla commented. A sound of wheels screeching brought their attention, the magic four-wheeler that came to a halt few meters behind them. As soon as it stopped, Urza jumped out of the car and ran toward her, followed by Lucy, Gray, and Happy. "Are you all right?" Urza asked as she looked wide-eyed at the petite wound-cowered girl sitting on the floor. "I'll be fine," Wendy said with a smile as she looked behind Urza. "Natsu wasn't with them. He said he would meet with us later," Gray answered her unasked question. "Oh, that's okay," Wendy said as she looked at the flute in her hands, only to watch a snake made of shadow took it out of her hands. The magic four-wheeler moved with a wheel as Kageyama yelled, "So long, suckers." The group of six stared at the retreating vehicle in silence. "Not a word about this to Natsu," Urza murmured. Kageyama cursed as he hit his head on a branch. "Damn woods, where was that mansion again? The night has fallen maybe half an hour ago, and since then Kageyama had been searching for the mansion where the meeting took place. He knew it was somewhere around this, but come on. How hard was it to find a big mansion in the middle of a forest?" Kageyama sighed as he leaned against the trunk, his eyes dropping to the white bandages the fairy tale kid warped around him. A movement through the woods made the wizard tense up as he looked around, dropping into a crunch as quietly as possible. A short old man stood between several trees, the white hair and thick mustache immediately telling the shadow user who he was looking at. "Fairy Tail's master, how the fuck are they always in my way?" Carefully Kageyama sneaked out, the new rustle in the bushes unnoticed by him. Hearing Kageyama's approach, Makarov raised his eyes from the magazine he was looking at. The mage noticed a girl in a swimsuit on the page before he hid it behind his back. Makarov smiled as he scratched the back of his head, excuse already on his lips before he realized he did not know who the boy in front of him was. The old master's eyes narrowed slightly as he noticed the white bandages warped around boy's stomach. "Shouldn't you be at the hospital, boy?" "They would not let me play at the hospital. Do you want to hear it?" Kageyama asked, taking out Lullaby. "Sure, why not?" Makarov said with a smile as he eyed the flute. In bushes, Urza and others were about to attack when Master Goldmine stopped them. "Just watch," Goldmine whispered as he settled beside them behind the bushes, Master of Blue Pegasus beside him. "That's one creepy-looking flute you got there," Makarov added. Kageyama nodded uneasily. "Why yeah." Kageyama put Lullaby to his mouth but hesitated. His grip tightened around the slender piece of wood. "Why can't I do it? He's right in front of me. It would be so easy. Just a single note and everything would change." "Nothing will change," Makarov whispered, shocking the Eisenwald member who stared at him in shock. "Is he reading my mind?" Makarov smiled at him. I'm not reading your mind. Kageyama's eye twitched. Your face is just easy to read. Damn, Urza had enough of standing on the sidelines, so she sprung to her feet as soon as Kageyama dropped the flute and fell to his knees. Master. Makarov looked at them, his mouth falling slightly open before he sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. What are you doing here, brats? We were following Kageyama in order to get Lullaby, Urza mentioned toward the fallen piece of cursed wood. Makarov nodded as he looked from the flute at the group of teenagers. Urza stood in front of him, behind him stood Lucy, Gray, and Wendy, who looked slightly worse for wear. The absence of pink-haired dragon slayer who should be with them didn't go unnoticed by the old master, but he chose not to comment on it. Makarov sighed again as he opened his mouth to talk, but was interrupted by a new voice that sent chills down the spine of everyone present. Miserable humans, the flute roared, I'll devour your souls. Everybody stared at the wooden flute on the ground in shock as purple smoke started rising from it. Crap, Gray muttered as he looked at the demon that slowly started rising from the smoke. It would seem that Lullaby truly is a demon from Zeref's book. This is rather unfortunate, Master Bob said. Zeref. Wendy yelled in shock as she turned to face the bald baster, who shrugged. As far as I know, only he was capable of forming demons as large as this that was able to walk in mortal plane. We don't have time to talk, guys. Gray yelled at them as the temperature around him dropped, his magic rising. We have to take it down. Low human scum like you will never be able to take me down. I am great and almighty Lullaby. The demon hissed before it threw his head backward. A purple sphere of energy started forming in his open mouth immediately. After a moment, as the energy concentrated, Lullaby jerked his head back up straight, the ball of energy released in a giant tornado of purple light. Urza cursed as she rolled out of the way, dragging Lucy along the way. Wendy jumped to the side, pushing as much magic as she could in her feet to send herself flying away as much as possible. Gray didn't move as he slammed his fist into outstretched palm, Ice Make, Shield. The light blue magic circle appeared beneath the wizards as a shield in the shape of a flower formed from the ground in front of him and masters, who watched in surprise and shock as the ice stayed whole after the beam hit him with full force, not even a crack on it as the beam received. Gray smirked as he let the shield vanish. Good thing the name's Lullaby. I was afraid it would be something really scary like Sparky, requip. Black wing armor. Urza yelled, ignoring Gray's joke as the golden light warped around her. The black armor formed around her as wings appeared on her back, a giant black cleaver in her hands. Gate of Golden Bull, I open thee, Taurus. Lucy cried, and in front of her appeared a man with bull's head. What can I do for your sexy booty, Lucy? Taurus asked as he looked at Lucy, wiggling his eyebrows at her. Lucy sighed and pointed at the raging demon currently engaged in a fight with Urza, who flying around its head. Help me defeat that demon, will ya? This is not time for your stupid flirting. Taurus sighed heavily as he nodded somberly. No matter how stupid you find me, your body will always move me. And with that, Taurus jumped in the air, his axe above his head ready to strike. Further away, Gray jumped into the air ready for the fight. Ice Make, Ice Cannon. In his arms formed a cannon made of ice, which he didn't hold for more than a second before firing it at the demon, making a hole in its shoulder. The demon screeched, but not from pain but from anger. Wendy pushed air in her feet as she pushed herself in the air again, wincing slightly as she felt the wounds from her last battle, but she ignored them as she spun in the air with a shout, Sky Dragon's Wing Attack. The attack hit the demon, making the huge thing stagger backward a bit but barely making any damage whatsoever. Lullaby growled in anger, Die from my magnificent song, you filthy scum. Die, oh dear God, Bob muttered as he looked at the demon with wide eyes. Makarov's eyes widened while Goldmine muttered a quiet, fuck, no. Urza yelled as she moved in on him again, only for the demon to send her flying away as its hand crashed into Flying Mage. Lullaby took in a deep breath, while everyone closed their eyes, and released it in a long shriek. Urza, who landed on her feet after being hit, was the first to open them as the shrinking continued. What the? Goldmine looked up at the demon, who stopped making the noise, looking confused. They made so many holes in it that it can't even sing. Oh, dear God, this is priceless. Lullaby looked at the master in shock before its feature turned from confused to furious. You will pay for what you did to me. I will kill you with my bare hands. I will crush you. Urza sighed as she readied herself. This was not good. She was getting tired and the others didn't look all that better. Lullaby cocked its head back again, the purple light gathering in his mouth. As it threw its head back toward them, something hit him in the head, snapping it to the side along with the beam that missed them completely. Is that? Makarov wondered before he smirked, facing the back of the figure that stood in front of them. Brother! Wendy cried happily as she clapped her hands in glee. Natsu didn't turn to look at them as he said, "Stay back. I'll take it from here." Is he planning to take down that demon by himself? Master Bob wondered as he looked at the young man in front of himself in worry. That's Natsu for ya, Happy replied. Natsu, isn't he one of your strongest S-class mages? The Kira, Goldmine asked amazed. Makarov smirked. That would be him. Natsu sighed soundlessly as he cracked his neck. This shouldn't take long. The Dragon Prince made a step toward the demon who looked at the newcomer in fury. You think you can take me on all by yourself? Don't be an idiot, human. There is not a man in your race strong enough to defeat a demon. Natsu didn't say anything but took another step. His magic started building up. By the third step, he was running at the demon, the hands glowing in black and blue energy. Lullaby roared as it brought down its fist on Dragon Slayer. Natsu rolled out of the way and stood on his legs in a movement practiced for too long to be done in any other way than perfect. The Dragon Prince jumped in the air with a spin to propel himself as far as possible, his magic-coated fist meeting with Lullaby's leg punching through the wood that was the demon's skin. Lullaby screeched again as it waved through the air trying to get the wizard off of himself, but Natsu just pushed his hand deeper under the wood before he ripped his hands out with a pull. The wood surrounding his hands exploded upwards, the sharpness flying around him. The demon screeched again as it brought his hand down on Dragon Slayer, who was holding on the edge of the hole in Demon's leg. Natsu smirked as the hand closed in on him. He jumped up and flipped in the air, catching the demon's fist before flipping again and jumped on the forearm of the arm. The other fist tried to catch him as Natsu moved across the arm too fast for the demon to even see him clearly. Lullaby's eyes widened as Natsu flickered in front of his face, breath already drawn as he shouted, "Chaos Dragon's Roar." The wizards who stood on the ground watched in morbid fascination as the tornado of black and blue energy exploded from Natsu's mouth, at least twice the size of the one Wendy produced on the station. As the roar subsided, Natsu dropped to the ground with grace barely possible. Lullaby stood in shock, half of its face gone and the other side burned beyond recognition from the sheer magic force. A grin cracked on Natsu's face as his eyes glistened madly, pupils enlightening in slits, as Lullaby looked at him with one good eye, still shocked by the sheer power. Whoever said I'm a human? Lullaby stared at him for another second before growling in anger, the shock wearing off only to be replaced by anger. You will regret ever coming here. Lullaby yelled as he tried to stomp at the pinkhead who didn't move as the leg came down on him. Did he just let himself get squashed? Goldmine asked as he looked at Lullaby, who was grinning triumphantly, the grin looking horrible on the mismatched face. No, Wendy said as she smiled, a black hole forming in thin air above Lullaby. Natsu dropped from it a second later, his hands already warped in magic. Chaos Dragon's Wing Attack. The attack hit the demon at point-blank range, exploding from its back to its chest, tearing a huge chunk of the wood. Lullaby dropped to its knees, gasping for breath and wheezing in pain. The huge demon raised a large amount of dust as it crashed into the ground that shook from the impact. Chaos Dragon's Sword Horn. Natsu yelled as he came down at the demon like a bullet, blasting through its chest like a bullet through paper. Once inside the demon, Natsu looked around and smirked, spotting the small glowing purple orb in the middle of the hollow chest caved in from multiple sides. The smirk on Natsu's face widened into a maddened grin. Lullaby gasped as it felt the mage moving from inside it. No, get out, you can't do this, watch me, Natsu replied, but the demon was the only one that could hear him. Chaos Dragon Crushing Fang. Natsu swung his fist at the glowing orb that shattered on the impact. Lullaby screeched in pain as its chest ballooned up before it exploded from the inside out. The mages on the sidelines watched the demon explode in shocked silence. A black hole opened in the ground, Natsu exiting from it holding a book with wooden covers. The remains of demon disappearing into the air like ash of a burning wood. Natsu looked at them with a raised eyebrow but didn't say anything. Master Bob started clapping enthusiastically, breaking the silence. Amazing, Makarov. Your children are truly fabulous. To defeat the demon so easily. What were your names again? Lucy, Gray, Urza, Wendy, and Natsu. Amazing. Happy looked at the master as he crossed his hands, pouting. Bob laughed. Yes, of course, Happy and Carla. Carla blushed. Oh, we didn't do anything. Goldmine chuckled as he turned to look at the pink head only for his smile to drop along with his jaw at the sight of the mansion behind the pink head. Or rather what was left of it. Noticing the sudden change in expression, Makarov followed his line of sight as it stopped on the ruins of the once great mansion. The old man blinked once, twice. "Crap, we will give you a 5-minute advantage," Goldmine explained. Gray blinked, confused. For what? Goldmine's eye twitched. To escape, they looked at each other in silence for a moment before they turned around and started running. Natsu looked at his retreating guildmates before he looked at the two masters who were staring at him in silence. "It was a pleasure meeting you," Natsu said after a moment as he nodded politely. Not a second later the hole opened beneath him as the Dragon Slayer disappeared. Goldmine and Bob exchanged another look before Goldmine huffed, "Weird kid." Bob chuckled as he smiled at the brown-haired man, "Adorable, isn't he?" 2 days passed since the incident in Clover Town. Makarov has not left the bar since, crying to Mira about bills the Seven has caused. Mira smiled at the master as she said, "I thought you were aware of the possibility this would happen. Urza, Gray, and Natsu are all highly destructive and you forced them on the same team." Makarov pouted. "It should have been fun." Wendy giggled, hearing this, from her spot near the two, a glass filled with apple juice in her hands. Natsu, who was beside her, released a soundless sigh, the only sign of it the slight movement of his shoulders and parted lips. "I'm right here, Mira." The Dragon Slayer looked at the cup of coffee in his hands as he tuned out the conversation around him, moving his senses further through the guild toward the window where Nightingale sat, a song flowing through its beak. As he listened to the song of the bird his eyes drifted to his left hand, warped in black bandages all the way up to his elbow. He was rudely pulled out of his thoughts as a hand slammed on the bar next to his cup, spilling the hot liquid over his hands, still clasped around the cup. The Dragon Slayer's eyes narrowed dangerously as he looked at the offender. Urza looked back at him, either ignoring or not noticing the glare, as she demanded, "Fight me." Natsu's eye twitched. Can't one have a moment of peace in this guild? After such request guild went silent. After all, this kind of demands usually ended up with Natsu ignoring Urza completely or Urza in the infirmary for the rest of the week. Needless to say, everyone stayed quiet, carefully listening Dragon Slayer's response. "No," Natsu deadpanned as he slowly removed his hands from the cup, taking a napkin from Mira with a nod of his head in thanks before whipping the hot drink from his fingers. "Oh, come on," Troy pleaded. If Natsu didn't say yes to this, Urza might vent her frustration on them. Certainly not something they looked forward to. "No," was his simple answer to their pleas. "You're no fun at all," shouted Kana as she swung her hand on the barrel in her lap. "Hey, sis, you can get some sense in him," Elfman said with a grin as he walked to Mira from Wendy's other side. Mira smirked as she circled around the bar and moved behind Natsu, whose back tensed up when Mira's hand ran down his spine. "Come on, Natsu, everyone wants to see it," Mira whispered, knowing full well Natsu will hear her as her hand traveled from the base of his spine up to his head, ending in his hair. Natsu's eye twitched again. If it was anyone else but Mira, they would probably need a new arm. Mira is and has been his weak point since they were kids, and everyone knew it. All except Lucy, who was shocked to the point that her mouth hanged open. How can she do that? No one is sure how she does it, but I think it's because Mira was one of the first aside Wendy who started talking to him simply because she wanted to, Levy explained from her spot next to Lucy, looking at the scene before her. Lucy nodded. What else could she do? Natsu stayed quiet for a good minute or so before finally nodding his head. "Fine, I'll do it. But do not blame me when I put her in infirmary again," Natsu said stoically as he glared half-heartedly at Mira, who smiled at him in response. The Dragon Slayer sighed again. Another waste of his time. Even before the first word left his, everyone cheered, moving out towards the backyard, closely followed by smug-looking Urza and Mira. The last to exit was Natsu, still wondering how he let this happen. When everyone got outside, Urza took her fighting position, but unlike her, Natsu didn't even bother to take him and sat down on the ground looking at Urza. "Why don't you take me on seriously? I'm not somebody you should underestimate," Urza said, annoyed. "Neither am I," Natsu said, still sitting on ground, shifting his eyes for a second to the doors that lead back inside the guild. "I didn't even manage to finish my coffee," he thought with a sigh. "Requip, purgatory armor," Urza cried, anger clearly visible on her face. Golden light wrapped around her body. As it disappeared, her regular armor was replaced by a black armor that was covered in spikes. Whoa, that's one of Urza's strongest armors. Jet shouted excitedly. She takes this really seriously. She's a real man, Elfman yelled as he pumped a right fist in the air. Gray sighed. She's a girl. Lucy looked at them before she facepalmed. Gray, your clothes, aw man. Shit, I'll look for it later. I want to watch this. Gray said, the desire to watch the fight too big to look for a shirt he probably won't find. Urza rushed towards Natsu, who didn't so much as twitch. When her blade was mere few inches from Natsu's forehead, he leaned back before planting his hands on the ground behind his head, lifting himself from the ground in a handstand, swinging his feet at Urza, who moved to the side in order to avoid the kick. Natsu pushed himself off of the ground just as Urza's oversized sword crashed into the ground where he stood. The Dragon Slayer landed on his feet and looked at Urza with an expressionless face, still not falling in any sort of fighting stance. Urza yelled in anger as she jerked the sword from the ground, ready to persuade her opponent again, but the said opponent disappeared from right in front of her, reappearing behind her, delivering a strong palm strike at the base of her skull. Urza's eyes widened as she stumbled forward, managing to catch herself with her sword, using it as a crutch while she tried to regain her balance. Urza looked at him in shock once she managed to see only one of them. How? The question was cut short as a fist connected with her jaw, lifting her feet off the ground. The scarlet-haired girl caught herself, spun in midair and landed in a crunch, rubbing her sore jaw that was without a doubt at least cracked. She looked at Natsu, who didn't move from the spot where he hit her. The lack of magic on his part was soon noticed by the Requip mage. Why are you not using your magic? Natsu raised his eyebrow at her. The expression didn't change, but the tone sounded almost mocking. Do I need it? She narrowed her eyes at him as she rushed toward him once again, her blade ready to strike, but once again Natsu bent backward, avoiding the blade completely. Not the one to make the same mistake twice. Urza didn't wait for Natsu to make another move as she moved closer in his space just as he started moving his legs away, twisting his body to the side. Her sword was still extended. Unable to get such massive blade above her opponent in time, she swung her fist at Natsu just as Natsu extended another palm strike at her chest. Her fist connected with Natsu's shoulder, but the Dragon Slayer's punch sent her flying back yet again. This time a crack resonated around them, her armor now sporting a large crack in the middle, spreading itself like a spider web. She slowly stood up from her fallen position as she clenched her jaw and looked at Natsu as their eyes locked. It was one of the few things she truly hated about him. She never could see anything in his eyes. It looked so unnatural, almost as if she was staring at the porcelain doll and not a human. She grunted as she lifted her sword again, pointing it at him. Natsu cocked his head to the side as Urza's eyes narrowed even more. It was unnerving, staring at him. His movements were always so restricted, controlled. Always, unless he was fighting. That was the time when he released whatever ropes hold him tied. That was the time when he moved with such grace and beauty it was as if he was born to do it. But the eyes didn't change. So fake. Didn't you learn until now that this won't work? He asked in his usual monotone, low voice. Urza was ready to sneer at him. Throw some insult. Sure, he was mocking her. But she stopped. He wasn't mocking her. He was teaching her. She smirked. Who would have thought? Requip. Lightning Empress armor. This was not about defense. It won't work against someone like him. She shook her head. She should have realized this before. She needs speed. Natsu's lips twitched up for a second before falling back down, as if a smile requires too much effort on his part. Urza looked at Natsu in her new blue armor with a golden outline, fixing the spear in front of herself. She rushed at him again, this time her speed matching the speed the Dragon Slayer moved a few moments ago as he leaned to the side over the slash of the spear before jumping up over the spear as it was moved down at his feet. I will win this time, Urza exclaimed as she moved in a motion ready to stab the Dragon Slayer moved a few moments ago as he leaned to the side over the slash of the spear before jumping up over the spear as it was moved down at his feet. I will win this time, Urza exclaimed as she moved in a motion ready to stab the Dragon Slayer in the stomach only to stab his afterimage. She stared in shock at the empty air in front of herself. She was matching his speed until a moment ago and now he proved he was capable of even greater speed. It was unnerving, again. Everything about him made her blood boil. So much power, for what? He didn't care about it. He never used it fully. Never. She growled as she turned around, barely having enough time to duck under his leg. moving her spear at his one leg that stood on the ground as the other finished the circular motion that was a kick that missed her head. The dragon slayer bent back again, planting his palms on the ground again ready to lift the leg and hit the redhead in the head in the process. Urza smirked as she dodged the foot and slammed the spear into the ground. Thunderstrike, she exclaimed as the small bolt of lightning traveled toward the dragon slayer, whose only sign of surprise was the barely visible widening of his eyes before his lips twitched up again. The lightning reached his fingers as he was blasted from the ground into the air, a small trail of smoke raised from his palms while Urza jumped in the air, leg bent at knee ready to deliver a strike to the stomach. Her own eyes widened as their eyes met again, Natsu catching her knee not even an inch before his stomach and twisted his body in the air, spinning Titania around, and before she could react he let go of her leg as she crashed into the ground, the stone beneath cracking from the impact. Natsu landed on his feet as he looked at his right hand, the skin intact. Interesting idea, he commented before his fist warped in chaos energy for the first time since the fight began. Urza's eyes widened as she pushed herself into a sitting position. His pupils elongated as the black and blue energy moved up his arm, all the way to his shoulder. Chaos Dragon's wing attack, he said as he moved the energy-warped hand at Urza in slash-like motion, the single beam of energy meeting its mark as Urza was sent flying backwards with a cry of pain, the energy burning in her skin and through her armor as it cracked and broke under the impact. Once she stopped her fall she looked at the sky before her eyes drifted to her own spear pressed against her throat, Natsu standing above her with eyes blank as ever. "You die," Natsu said as a matter of fact, and Urza had little doubt if this was a real fight between enemies it wouldn't be true. She nodded as she let her head drop back, her armor disappearing into golden light, replaced by her Heart Crew's armor. Natsu released the spear and as soon as he did it disappeared in the same gold light as her armor. "And I lost once again," Urza muttered as she sat up, Natsu moving few steps back to give her some space. "Did you expect a different outcome?" Natsu questioned as he looked at her. Urza turned to glare at him but stopped once again. Was he really mocking her? The guild members around them stayed quiet for another moment before they all began clapping and screaming in delight. Makarov smiled as Urza raised to her feet, stumbling slightly from the wound beneath her armor. He had little doubt that Urza and Natsu will one day come to an understanding. Laxus beside him kept his eyes stubbornly fixed on Natsu, who seemed to ignore him completely. He hated him. If there was one person who he truly hated it was the pinkhead in front of him. Always so calm, even when insulting someone. But he couldn't help but respect the man. One of the few truly strong members, worthy of wearing fairy tale symbol. Laxus snorted. Prick. His attention was pulled from the dragon slayer, who was now conversing with his sister, who insisted to take a look at him while he refused it as elegantly as an elephant walking in a house made of glass, by exclamations of some members as they moved out of the way of a frog-like man. The frog man clapped his hands. That was truly impressive. Indeed it was. Bravo, the council, Makarov said after seeing rune knights behind the frog. The frog man cleared his throat. Ah yes. We are here to arrest Natsu Souleater under charges of destroying public property in Clover Town. The silence lasted only a second. What? Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The next part will be out soon.